Oh, there was
Just so you know, if you want, I can educate the committee maybe from a little bit different perspective.
Yep.
I'm not a Bill Homick yes man. Okay?
That's great.
So,
Talk about a lot
not
of
that I don't
attention.
disagree,
Yep.
but there's different ways to look at things.
Call to meeting, the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for Monday, November 13th. Gina?
Tony Gokenbach. Greg Scornia.
here.
Mark Kleesner.
Here.
Mark Piontek.
Here.
Tom Holdmeyer.
Here.
Sandy Lucy.
Here.
John Borgman.
Here?
Chuck Watson.
Here.
Samantha Wecker. Here. Callan Witt.
Here.
Sal Maniaci.
Here.
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. First item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the October 9th meeting.
Mr. Chairman,
Motion to approve. Oh, I'm
I
sorry.
have a correction.
Okay.
I read in the paper that I wasn't here. I wasn't here, and it says I was present.
Okay.
I missed the most exciting meeting.
It was a long one.
Yeah, gee.
Any other comments on the minutes?
Motion to approve as corrected.
Second?
First, second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Moving on to item number 3, case number 17-1101, Front Street Development, Plat 2. Applicant is requesting approval of Front Street Development, Plat 2. Number 4 is also on this.
Actually, they're different parcels.
Yeah, but
So-
it's same.
Yeah. So,
Different but the same.
right. Because
Okay.
technically the first one is in the TIF and the second one is not. So, they're different. So, but
Does it make sense to take them up together, or if we vote separate?
We'll have to vote separate.
Well,
Yeah.
right, but,
So, well, I'll get through the first one and then we
Oh,
can,
okay.
yeah, so, but the first one is located at the front half of this lot. It's the corner of Front and Market. If you remember in January, actually I think it was February of this year, we vacated this portion of Front Street just along this block. And so the plat will reflect that. And then here's the zoning. It is Zone C3, is this portion up here. So it allows that 0 lot line in the mixed use. They are requesting as part of this plat 4 lots for the townhomes. This is, like I said, the Phase 2 at the Front Street plat that was approved for the new TIF, also that was approved this past February. It does, still goes along with that original development plan that was submitted and approved. It does show the 4 lots here. As you can see, they'll be facing the vacated Front Street, but their right-of-way frontage will be along Market, and that's the reason we have this peculiar flag shape. Typically, we would try and discourage that type of lot, just because with maintenance issues and everything, where people not knowing where their property line begins and ends. But since we vacated Front Street and actually there was no physical access on that right-of-way, this was the best alternative option. In this C3, we don't have minimum lot sizes or lot widths, so there's not a real issue here. It's just on paper, it does look a little strange, but this was actually as a staff recommendation. We originally thought, let's maybe do an actual private street in here, but essentially with side parking and with the garages, it would probably appear to the public that the city was then maintaining a private parking lot is what it would look like. So we thought the best option was just to go with these flag lots. They do show all the cross-access easements in the rear. I actually have it, it does say no parking on the bottom because this will be a fire lane, 26 foot wide. There is a note on the bottom that it's dedicated to the pub, or it's dedicated fire lane. And then up here they do show the easement along the vacated portion of Front Street. So the original property line was this dotted line. Or I'm sorry, this little bit faded dotted line, the first one. And if you remember when we vacated Front Street, we decided, well, let's just go ahead and make the full 25 feet utility easement because there is a water line that runs back there, and that was just the easiest and cleanest way to do it without doing a new survey. Just whatever was, there was 50 foot of easement, the 25 that is going to Andy will just be part of an easement. Well, the city doesn't actually need that full 25 feet in order to maintain what we have there. Typically, 10 feet is plenty enough. In this case, Kevin Quatham, our Public Works Superintendent, did mention that the water line is a little bit deeper here, so there may be some need for a little bit more room to work if there was a water main break. But with that being said, they show 20 feet here, which is perfectly fine. Kevin Quatham did review this. The reason we actually requested to, if you see this note, it says 5-foot utility easement vacation. That's in the space in between these dotted lines. It's because there is space there for patios to be poured for these townhomes. And rather than, even though there's not if it wouldn't require a building permit, they could build over that. It would just be another headache if we needed to get in there and there was an easement. So we decided, let's just vacate that 5 feet and leave this 20 feet in utility easement. And that was perfectly enough space for Public Works to get in there if there needs to be an issue. So all the rest of the notes on the plat are as needed, and we do recommend approval. Oh, they do have, they are submitting for the final plat to be approved next week as well. As part of this, sometimes, developers, when they're doing subdivisions, can separate. There is going to be a new water line that, there's a new hydrant here, and a new water line that runs down, and so there will be a performance contract attached to the ordinance on Monday, just to make sure that that's in place prior to any occupancy given. Other than that, all the improvements are in, so there's really, there's no, the sidewalks are part of the TIF, so there's no need for any performance contract on that, and there's no street sweep blades, so the water line is really the only thing we need a contract on.
Any questions or comments of Sal from the board? Andy, is there anything you'd like to add?
Andy Understall, Front Street Development. Yeah, that on the 20-foot easement out there, we want to put some steps. There's we raise those units up. They're about probably 5 foot off the ground, so there'll be some stairs coming off. So rather than have them land in an easement, we thought it'd be better off just narrowing that up to 20 foot. That's why we asked for the 5 foot extra. But we're still building back behind the original property line. We're not going to build out over that, but there will be some stairs coming off the decks and stuff, down in that area. So. Off the back patios, and then on the flag lots, it's going to be a homeowners association, so there'll be they'll pay dues to get their snow plowed, and and there'll be it's a cross easement for access and for utilities and all that kind of stuff behind the units that go right up to the units. So we feel that it's a pretty good plan, workable, at all of our other properties that we've developed in the same way. So with the zero lot lines and a homeowners association in place. So that's about all I have to add. If somebody has a question.
Questions or comments?
I have a couple.
Yeah.
Always do,
That's fine.
The easement, will that be something you'll maintain?
Yeah, we're going to hope. The deal with this property was by getting that vacated. I'm hoping to actually put to kind of fence those like little fenced yards. Which would be gates that would open. Basically it'd be a straight fence along the tracks, and then there'd be some like 12-foot gates in the middle of that. That could be that way. It kind of gives you a little yard where something different. People ask for like some people we needed like some flats. Whenever we had the other projects, they said, well, hey, we really don't have any flats. So in this project we added flats into this new project, and then some people they didn't have yards, so we was able to get a little yard space here where at least you could let your dog out. If you didn't want to have to walk your dog every day. So
Okay, then the primary entrance to each unit will be off the back?
off of the back, yeah, they're real similar to the units at Rhine River. You can kind of see it's lighted in there. There's a 2-car garage, and then there's an entrance on each of them. There's four different entrances there. Off the back, it's like 8 foot wide. You can kind of see where the garage door, and then it's a 2-car garage in each of those. So. And you'll still have another 20-foot parking in front of the garage, so you'll have a spot for four cars there. And then there's going to be another piece of property in between there and the old Bolden property, which I'm going to create a few more parking spots probably in the future. But right now we're just going with this. There's plenty of parking for what they have there.
But there will be doors that will go out into these individual smaller yards towards the north.
Yeah, there'll be there's a deck that's 5 foot off the ground, and there'll be stairs to the ground. So
Okay, and then just for curiosity's sake, if the fire department wanted to get access to the front, say if we wanted to get in from another way,
Yeah, they could just open those gates, because they'll have to be, be able to be open to mow their yards and stuff. They won't be lockable gates, they'll just open up. And
Okay.
if they had to back in there, say for some reason, yeah.
well, we wouldn't, but just to walk personnel in.
Right, yeah, yeah.
Mine might be closer to go that way than it would be to come all the way through the house.
Right. I mean, and I'm not even for sure that they're going to want to fence them, it may be, but I'm just, myself, I'd like to see a little white picket fence there,
Sprinkler?
I've been overruled on that, but
How will those 3 lanes be divided?
those in the back, Mark, those won't be, they'll just be, all that is it's basically giving me street frontage for those lots.
Okay.
So that whole drive, that 27-foot drive is an easement, for everyone to share across easement. So their property line's shaped that way, but it's a cross easement for everybody, that everybody can cross over, so. So, yeah, there won't be any lines or nothing painted or marks or anything. It's because it's everything up to their 20 foot off of the back of their house. There's some little planters there. You can see it on that first dotted line, where it kind of runs through. So everything from there back, the next 27 foot is the fire lane, so.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Oh, Andy, there's no sidewalk in front. Sal mentioned about sidewalks, but there's not.
No, there's no sidewalks in front of these, just on the side.
Okay, that's what I thought, but I
Yeah.
just wanted to make sure I understood correctly.
Okay. Yeah, he was kind of saying we weren't adding any sidewalks where we would have to pay in for the, what do you call it? What's
The performance contract,
Performance
typically
contract.
any public infrastructure, we require
Right.
that to be included in the cost estimate, but for the sidewalks along Market, since that's part of the TIF, that's not required to be part of the contract.
Right.
So,
Yeah, and we're adding that extra fire hydrant, basically. I'm not for sure if we decided we're going to eliminate the other fire hydrant that's down there in the middle of nowhere, or if we're just.
no, because
gonna
it's
leave it.
still it's accessed, there's a fire hydrant right about here, and it's accessible by foot from behind the Frankenberg's house.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's going to remain, and we actually, and this summer, I haven't spoken with Andy yet, but we talked about it with Chief. We may add, talking to Kevin Quatham, a fire hydrant at Locust and Main, just to cover the area.
Just because you've got 5 within your 1,000 feet.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a hydrant that's out in the middle
That
of
would-
nowhere there,
yeah,
in the
right,
woods
yeah.
almost, so.
That would really cover, I don't know if it's in the area, yeah, it is. That would cover these homes, really, because there's no hydrant down here. The hydrant currently is down on this old Front Street right-of-way. And so, right now, when you go down Walnut with a fire truck, someone has to run down and connect by foot, it's going to remain.
Right.
But they talked about putting I think I said Locust, a fire hydrant at Walnut in Maine.
Right, when we originally discussed that, we decided that actually the hydrant would be more accessible where we're adding it than where it is now, because the hill's not as steep, because it's really steep going down to the front. This is going to be a little more gradual, not as high of a climb, so they did have to throw a hose down there to reach those houses that are way out there, so.
Will
Okay,
this be sprinkled?
I'm sorry?
Will the building be sprinkled?
No.
I didn't think so.
John, I don't think I pointed out beforehand, but this easement you see here, this is 25 feet wide. What we vacated 50 feet. That's actually, obviously you can tell the train tracks are not perfectly parallel. So it says 49 feet here and 52 feet wide here. That's what the original right-of-way was. And so if for some reason, it's not a full fire lane, but there is, what you see today will remain from here on back.
Yeah, but you can't get access to it with a truck.
Right, but I mean, it's just, if for some reason you need something, to pull in back there, it is 25 feet. It's not a technical fire lane by the code, but the 25 feet will remain. So I
Any other-
think it'll be possible to access that fire hydrant, not that we would prefer to use that as access, but it'll be, I think worst case scenario, still available.
Any other questions or comments?
Exciting.
Yep.
If there are none, I will entertain a motion on item number 3.
Motion to approve?
Second?
First and a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Moving on to item number 4, case number 17-1102, Andy Understall, Main and Market rezoning. Applicant is requesting to rezone 101 and 105 East Main Street from C2 General Commercial to C3 Central Commercial District.
Yep.
So,
So this is the adjoining property to the south. If you remember, this was actually not technically in the TIF that was approved in February. We only include vacant properties at that time, and then the well house. But this is where the antique store is on the corner, and then there's some apartments in that house there. Currently, it is zoned C2, which is the only C2 property downtown. I guess that was originally approved that way for the antique store back when zoning came to effect in the 80s. I'm not really sure why. I guess a market may have been that buffer at the time where it officially stopped being the central business district. But there is C3 zoning adjoining to the north, obviously, with what was just approved, and then obviously everything to the west as well. The only difference between C2 zoning and C3 zoning is that it officially allows that mixed use and adds the residential uses. So right now, technically, this property is not in conformance with the residential uses that are there. It's grandfathered because technically those are not permitted in C2. So bringing this into C3 actually brings the property into conformance, even if that is not the long-range plan, to be on that site. Since it's not part of the TIF, we have not requested any plans on that yet. But the zoning all by itself, staff feels is appropriate. It fits into the area of downtown and actually brings the property into conformance. So we have no issue with it. We recommend approval.
And everything else around is already C3?
Well, everything to, I keep trying to, it's not plugged in.
Residential.
Everything to the property to the north, and then everything to the west is C3. But as you go east, it does get out of that downtown district. And this darker blue, I know it's hard to see. I think it's a little bit better on the TV. The darker blue is actually R3, which is multifamily. I could not tell you why those 3 blocks there are zoned multifamily. A lot of that actually is single family. But that's the way it was zoned when it came into effect. So those are actually technically not in conformance either, but they are not C3. They are multifamily. So if this property that we're rezoning tonight were to get developed, that's zero setback is not permitted on the eastern property line. If you're joining a residential use like this is here, you have to be 6 feet back, just like you would in any other residential district. So there'll still be a small buffer, between those 2 properties.
Questions or comments by board members? Andy, you have anything else? Okay. There's nothing else. No one else have any comments? Entertain a motion.
Motion to approve?
Second.
First and a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So move. Thanks, Andy. Case number 171104, the sale of Lot 12 of Heidemann Industrial Park to Magnet LLC, Amendment 19 to the redevelopment plan. Sal?
So if you remember, we've done this twice in the past year. When a lot is sold in Heidemann Industrial Park, it has to go through this redevelopment plan amendment process, and it goes to P&Z and council. It's just a paperwork process that it is to get approved. I'll show you the lot, just so everyone's aware. Lot 12, we have accepted it's this one here, right at the corner of Enduro Drive and Vospring Drive. I'm sorry, I don't have an aerial. But it's the only graded lot left that's pre-graded. We accepted a purchase agreement on that. 353 has approved, and council is aware of it and has approved, and it'll move forward to council next week, so it's good news.
Questions, comments? If not, entertain a motion.
So move.
First, second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Moving on to other business, street grades.
So a couple things. I know the memo was in your packet. I apologize. Gina passed out before the meeting this. I think I referenced it in my memo and then realized today that it wasn't in there. But it was John Neal just actually got this from Chief's contact at IFC, and it really gives us, this is what John used. I will tell you, John was the one who gave me those numbers, those yields of the decrease in capacity. So if you go through my memo, it's I kind of summarized it there in that fourth paragraph, but really looking at the risk factor of allowing a street grade to go from 10% to 12, the biggest risk is whenever a fire apparatus, whenever we're using a bucket truck. You know, whenever the ladder truck is in use and the weight that is able to use whenever you're facing downhill and the bucket's leaning the other way, obviously, when you're on a steeper grade, there's a higher chance of the truck being imbalanced or losing balance, having too much weight on the top. So using the tables that were submitted to us, John came up with some numbers, but essentially says that in worst case scenario, because when you're looking at this, there's so many scenarios you can look at. You really want to say, okay, well, what does the table say is the worst case? That's what we want to use because you want to try and prepare for that. When it's 20 mile per hour winds and a 1/4 inch of ice, really you only have the highest capacity of a ladder truck when the grade is at 9%. So in the worst case scenario, us allowing up to 10% is actually decreasing capacity already, essentially is what that means. So John took the average of what they said the capacity decreases for each degree of the ladder. So as you go up, you can see, and it says waterway and waterway dry and waterway charged. I guess dry, and correct me if I'm wrong, John, but dry is when you're making a rescue, and charged is when you're actually using the ladder to put out a fire. There's a different amount of weight you can have in there. You can see whenever it's dry, you can have much more weight as it goes up. When it's charged, you can see as you go to 39%, you have 250 pounds. 39 degrees, you have 250 pounds, and then 500 when it gets to 49 degrees. So, as I put in my memo, essentially you lose 10% capacity at each grade. So if we allowed up to a 12% max street grade, in the worst case conditions, your ladder truck would be losing 30% of its full capacity. Now, I think the question is if does that pass that threshold where it is no longer safe enough for us to approve these street grades? Obviously, we have, we saw 2 months ago when we had that list, the list of streets that already have above 12%. This is under worst case scenario. It's still possible to utilize these streets and make rescues on them, but you're not going to have as much success with the ladder trucks. I think there's also an argument where, in most cases, you're not going to be necessarily using a ladder on these residential streets, a ladder truck. But as I understand, I think regardless, that is the first truck that, I think they send that out regardless, don't they, John, in the fire?
It's not as apt to go out on a residential structure unless it's in the headquarters response area.
Okay.
Obviously, if it's in at the other east or west end of town or south further, you'll probably get the pumpers there first as opposed to the ladder truck. But typically, we don't use the ladder truck on residential. If we had an all-residential city, we wouldn't even need a ladder truck.
Right.
The reason we need it is because we have 5 buildings over 35 feet tall.
Right.
Otherwise, we wouldn't even need it. So you're exactly right. The chances of it being used, it has been, don't get me wrong, but it has been used as a pumper because it has a pump on it and not necessarily the ladder function of it.
Right.
Unless we happen to have a chimney fire that you can't get an extension ladder up to, but then you have to have ideal conditions because setback comes into play and all those dimensions that, the triangle has to be able to reach. So.
Right. And it's my impression that successfully use it as a pumper, the grade doesn't necessarily affect that. It
doesn't make any difference.
Right. It's the weight on the ladder itself.
Correct.
So I think it's up to this board to make a recommendation and for council to make a recommendation. I think there's some options here if we would like to keep it the way it is and have it be on a case-by-case basis. I think, we went back on site plan. I think that and I don't want to speak for Chief, I think that may be his preference on that just because it does seem like the safest way. My recommendation would be that if we're going to continue to grant these as variances, under certain specific conditions anyway, why not just amend the code to reflect those certain conditions? over this past year, anytime we've had a request, and it's only been a couple times, where they said, hey, the developer said, hey, we may need a variance on the street grade. Well, there was, say the existing grade is at 10%, 9%. Well, if it works out for them to be a little bit cheaper to build their basements a certain way, to build the homes a certain way, if they could increase the grade to 12%, it was cheaper for them. We said, no, well, you're decreasing safety for, you're causing your own problem. But we had other conditions where the variance was just granted 2 months ago where the existing grade was at 14 or more, 14% or more, and they were bringing it down to 12. So they're at least making an effort to make it safer, and to a point where we thought, and obviously council thought, that it was able to safely be utilized and used as a fire access road. So I would say if we are willing to go up to this 12%, maybe have the, and this is just something I threw out, was amend the code to say that all proposed streets must not exceed a grade of 10%, so keep it as is. An exception to this requirement may be given if the existing grade measured at the center line of the proposed street, so if the existing grade of that property exceeds 12%, in which case the maximum grade of a proposed street may be up to 12%. So essentially, if the existing conditions are worse, you can bring it down to 12. But if it's between 10 and 12 already, you're going to have to bring it down to 10. I think that was our goal, and if that works for us, we can go forward with a possible code amendment that obviously would not go from here tonight. That would still come back to P&Z. We'd have a normal public hearing. But I just thought, if I understand the benefit of doing it on a case-by-case basis, but if we can define the basis that we're going to start approving these, we may as well amend the code. So.
Any other comments, John?
Well, I think that sets the parameters to get us as close to what we can get, what we want, and still not be way extreme and letting somebody do a 14% street grade.
Right.
I think if we can say, you know, yeah, we don't want you to go the other way with it, but we want you to try to meet at least the 10%.
And this code amendment would cause, I mean, not cause, but it would have developers actually put some more effort up front with putting getting topo for the preliminary plats. We don't require that right now, and that was kind of the issue with this, where we do want to try and save them as much money up front because we understand they don't know. There's always a chance a plat could get denied. You know, if the neighborhood comes out against it, we don't want to make them spend a whole bunch of money on engineering costs up front. So we get that they want to spend that money later after they know it's actually going to go through. That's what happened the last time. We didn't require topo on there, and when they came in with their construction plans, that's when we said, well, you're more than 10%, and they had to come back, slow the whole process down. We realized that it was something we were going to approve anyway. So
This would fix that.
They would have to, if there was any question that it wasn't going to be 10%, they would have to get that topo report beforehand to show what the existing grades are.
Because if you think about this, this is worst case scenario. You know, first of all, you have to have 1/4 of an inch of ice. You have to have 20-mile-an-hour winds. You have to have a structure fire that we're going to have the ladder truck set up in front of the building first for any of this to even come into place. Well, first of all, I can't remember the last time we had 1/4 of an inch of ice, 20-mile-an-hour winds. Now, they have that. Yeah, I know, I'll jinx this this winter. If you look, and the reason I say that,
And then your structure's going to catch fire.
the reason that you have this is you see it once in a while on television in the wintertime up north. You get up into Wisconsin, the East Coast, they have ice storms, and ladder trucks get up in the air they get a lot more than 1/4 of an inch ice that they can't move them until they thaw them out. So this standard, or information, if you want to call it that, does apply to those kind of climates. I really don't know that we have that kind of climate here. You know, the people in Florida don't ever worry about this. So,
Isn't the bucket heated?
no.
How much you pay for those?
1.2 million if we had to replace it. Okay?
Are there any other safety concerns that we need to address besides, you know, the unlikely scenario of the ice, the bucket, and the wind in these grades?
Outside of fire safety, we looked at the possibility of treating it actually when it comes to winter weather and actually
Right.
having your ice trucks go down. Well, or your snow plows go down. Obviously, it will increases the grade, increases the probability of having an accident. But when I think John brought that up when he was here last time, it's hard to put a number on that. I mean, we have those issues on 8% slopes. You know, I think there was an issue in Windy Hills, and that doesn't exceed 10%. But we had an accident there, I think, last year or the year before. So, I mean, it can happen anywhere, but you're right, it does increase, you know, the probability of having an accident when you're treating the roads. Same thing with your trash trucks, but.
And with this terrain of what we're dealing with here in town, I mean, again, it's like, you know, you're dealt the cards that you're dealt to deal with and stuff.
Right, we do have, as we grow south, the topography is a little bit worse than it was. I mean, you look at when it,
Right.
on the older side of town where the grid system works great, you know, a lot of that, the topography wasn't as bad. Except for our oldest part of town here, they made it work back in the day, but going out the river. But it does get worse as you go south of 100. And obviously, I'm not looking for a recommendation necessarily tonight. I can always bring back the code and we can vote on it and have a public hearing, or you can let me know via email to get that scheduled. If you want to take a look at it, the streets we just approved for the 12% are all in over at Overlook. So we actually went and walked them. Honestly, they don't look terrible. You can tell they are, you know, some of them are already leveling out, so they're not for steep as long. You can barely tell at all, but you can tell the ones that have the stub street at the end that it stubs at 12%. I mean, it's steeper than 10. You can definitely tell, but, you know, it's walkable. A sidewalk would definitely work on it if someone wanted to pay to put it in. So, but excuse me, I would say go look at those on Overlook and, you know, get kind of a feel for what 12 would look like. And that would be the exact situation that we would amend our code to be. Those were 14, then he got up to 12, or actually in between. Some of them are 11, some of them are 12. All three streets going south there are more than 10, though. So.
Yeah, and I think, from my perspective, I think if we could do something similar to what you have there in number 1, I think that would be a good base to start with to amend the code. And I agree, we need to do it, amend the code so that it's, you guys know and everybody knows what the rules are before they start, rather than come into and request have to go through the variance process and all that every time. I think that.
Well, and two, again, like Sal was saying, I mean, somebody coming in with wanting to buy some property and stuff like that, I mean, have the opportunity to check a little bit more ahead of time before we get to that point.
Right. If they're even close to needing a variance, they'll have to do a little bit more homework, which I think
Right.
is a good thing, so.
So then, I mean, my question is, I'm going down the slippery slope per se. If someone's wants to go over 12, that then invites a variance?
Yes, it would be the same process where they could come in like Vic did after the fact, and it'd just be a solo variance application, or it can be submitted like we've been doing beforehand as part of the plat and show it on there. I will say that when it's the latter and they're shown on the plat, it's gotten buried in there and it doesn't seem to be like that big of a deal. Like the variance we did with Vic, there's a lot more discussion, there's a lot more to look at because that was the only thing we were talking about on that case. When you bury it into, say someone's doing a 50-lot subdivision and they're asking for one street to be 14%, I mean, luckily, if it's shown on there, we'll be able to show the commission that it is past that, but, you know, things have gotten buried like that before, so.
Any other questions, comments? You have anything, Andy?
He doesn't have to build new streets when he builds downtown.
Anything else by board members? Anything on Airbnb or similar?
I got my committee picked out for our sharing economy committee to talk about other options. I got some Uber drivers on there, and we're going to figure out who and what. I am not planning on amending the code at this time. I know that was kind of the discussion of what was wrong with how that got to this point, but I don't think there's anything wrong with the code. I think the code, if anything, maybe we could clear up the definitions. I understand that to get away from vacation rental by owner to short-term lodging. I think that maybe there could be benefit to that, but other than that, I think our process is good. I mean, whether you want it right outside of the downtown district or you want it on the other side of town, you still got to get a special use permit. You still got to notify neighbors. We actually got one today for one on East 3rd Street. So we'll see how that one goes. It's on the older side of town, but it's not downtown. So
I would encourage those people, when you're in that process of getting a permit or application, that they see their neighbors.
Right. I actually did talk to this person was already, it already was their second home. They live in Lake Sherwood, and because they actually talked about doing leasing it out at 1 month, just having it be a rental home, but doing 1 month leases. I'm like, well, there's nothing we can do about that. If you want to have, we can't say you can or can't rent your home out, and we can't say that it can only be for so long. So there is some, you know,
I mean, by
wiggle room
law,
there.
if they don't have a lease, it's a month-to-month tenancy.
Right.
So,
I really don't see, you know, after our meeting, you think, I thought about it, and it just, people are not going to rent out to people that are going to come in and, I mean, if they're going to take things, they'll take it at the place they're renting. So they're going to be checking and doing some verification. It's,
Right, and that's why I think that this committee will be good, and I'm actually going to try and set the date this week. I want to get the committee together to figure out what we all want to, what bases we want to cover. I think we could actually expand it a little more, but we may not be necessary. But to try and just educate people about the process, because, I mean, I think I've said it before, but the first time I used Airbnb, I thought it was weird. When someone told me, like, we're just going to stay in someone's home while they're not there. But once you use it multiple times, it's you know, it's pretty normal. It's a straightforward process. You have to get, to sign up for Airbnb, you do have to have a background check yourself. I mean, to be able to rent. So there's a process on both sides. They have to approve you, and you have to approve them. Same with Uber. I mean, if you're looking at your driver and they got a bad record, or, you know, 0 stars, maybe you won't pick that driver to come pick you up. Same with the
but then
passenger.
there are other services that, you know,
That's true.
don't necessarily go to those points.
Yeah, and that's the other thing, that that is a good point. With our special use permit, you can, if it's approved, you can then list it on Airbnb. You can also list it on Craigslist.
Or some other unsavory sites.
Right, Facebook, anything.
Trust me, there are worse
You
sites.
can get worse. Yeah. So, I mean, I definitely can see that it can tumble into worse, you know, a worst case scenario, but it's definitely a type of lodging that we need to provide. Because I know people, if they travel in groups, won't even look for a hotel. They want to stay with a group of 10 people in a house because it's cheaper and it's more fun with their group. That's what they're going to look at doing. Like, I already know people who have done that out here to go to wineries. Some of my friends from St. Louis have used Airbnb out here.
I guess I see the problem as being the same with a group renting it or homeowners. It could happen that they get a little loud sometimes with
Right.
parties. And
We have a nuisance ordinance.
Yeah, exactly. So you're going to have to do the same process you
Right.
would if it's homeowner or renter. So,
Yeah, I think the noise complaint may not turn out to be as founded as they may think. I could see some issues with possible tenants, you know, some other issues, but I don't know if the noise will ever be the issue that you may think. But
I mean, there just may be areas of the community where it's a more appropriate use than others, which is why I tend to think that the process you have is a good one.
right, I mean, we're not going to have a bed and breakfast overlay district. Let's just keep it as, you know, let's keep it as you get it approved as we go. So.
Good idea.
One other question I have. I noticed we approved, this goes several months back, a rezoning and required a fence be built at Bluff Road and the road that goes down to Parker Hannafin. And my question, I guess, is...
Oh, the recycle center.
Yes. No,
No,
that
no.
property
The
this side
car.
of the recycle
it
center.
looks like a recycle center,
The
but it's
other-
a corner lot we've
The
been
car
talking
lot.
about.
Right.
The auto repair,
It's a
Federated or
car
something like
business.
that.
They've got
Right there in the corner.
Yeah,
At Bluff Road?
yeah.
Bluff Road and Lang Drive.
Lang Drive, thank you. Anyway, my question is,
4 lane on the corner there.
Okay.
once we put a requirement on a property when it's a special use permit and a fence, and then last month we talked about that fence requirement, and we give them 30 days for the fence. And who then is the one that goes out and makes sure that that fence is in fact up and put up the way we wanted it?
Well, typically, it would be as part of the occupancy inspection. So our inspector would go out and it'd be a part of the checklist item. And that's scenario, I think it was we caught them in violation already. And so they already had an occupancy. And so that's why there has not been a second inspection. So we'll have to
They've
verify
got
that.
fence post up, and that's it.
Okay.
I think they actually had material up and it was taken back down.
I know there was some ownership changes at that property, so I'll have to look into
Okay.
it because I think the recycle, it's one parcel where there was a recycle center and then also the auto care people. And I think the ownership changed and their leases may have changed. So yeah, I'll have to check into that.
So when does the clock start ticking from that? If we give them a 30-day,
From the date of the ordinance approval.
so as an example, last month, that got approved then, what, the next week after our meeting,
It was approved,
I believe?
yeah,
I think it was a week after.
yeah, it was the week after that one didn't get pushed.
So
Yeah, it's coming up here.
technically,
He's aware of that, Mark.
fence should be finished by next council, next
30
week.
days, so, yep.
And I don't.
Yeah, and he actually called and verified that, I know, so.
So how does that work then if that doesn't happen?
Well, that's something that we'll have to keep an eye on, we'll have to make sure our inspectors look at. Luckily, he's got open permits, so we'll just won't close out permits, and if he doesn't put them up, then he's in violation of his ordinance,
Okay.
so.
I guess that was my question is we make the recommendation, but it doesn't seem like there's, and that's just
Right.
the two properties I noticed when they were.
Someone, a good example was, there was, I can't think of the name of it, but where this tire processing facility was right up here on Fish Street, there were stipulations in that special use permit ordinance that they couldn't keep any tires outside. Anytime we see them, just when our inspectors go by, or when the neighbors are pretty good about calling, we call them and they say, hey, you're in violation of your ordinance, you got so many days to clean it up, and he's bad about repeating it, but he's normally good about also cleaning it up. So,
Okay.
it's just kind of a policing thing.
Because I know there was another fence requirement I think we did, although the property hasn't developed and done anything yet, at Fifth and
Yeah,
Hancock, I
yes,
believe.
that's, he was gonna move across the street from.
right.
I've spoken to him, he just hasn't decided to move forward yet. Those only have a year before they expire, so.
Okay, thank you.
Interesting.
Any other questions, comments by board members? I know you're used to staying till 9:30, 10 o'clock. Nothing else, I'll entertain one last motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved.
Haven't seen any.
All right, hey,
We got our own.
it's upstairs. I'm gonna call you tomorrow. I have some questions about the cost estimate on there.